Guys, welcome to another video. You've got Mr. Everything English. Now guys, as we get through January, you should have now got back your mock exam results, and you should know your strengths, you should know your weaknesses, which should all focus your revision. Now, one of the key fundamental skills when it comes to English language is your ability to understand, discuss, explain the impact, the effect of language. Shocker, right? But this skill is everywhere, guys. Paper 1, question 2, paper 1, question 4, paper 2, question 3, paper 2, question 4. You have to some extent, analyze language. Language means similes, metaphors, verbs, adjectives, all that stuff. And then in paper 1, question 5 and paper 2, question 5, you have to use language in your writing. So language is a fundamental, key, important part of English language. That is why, guys, in this video, we're gonna start with looking at that skill and how you go about understanding and truly understanding how you go about approaching these questions. The question that we're gonna begin with is paper 1, question number 2, which is the infamous language question. But remember, guys, paper 1, question 2 and paper 2, question 3 are basically the same question, just worth a different amount of marks. So guys, let's begin looking at paper 1, question 2 from the AQA exam board. Everything education. Tuition for maths, English and science. So the paper 1, question 2 that we're going to be using is from the June 2023 paper. If you need any papers, guys, head over to everythingeducation.co.uk. Click on the past papers tab and there's loads of the papers there. Even this one is there. Now guys, paper 1, question 2, we should all know that this question is worth 8 marks. Now for an 8-mark question, we're looking to spend 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, you're looking to write 2 pretzel paragraphs. Now guys, I repeat, I don't fight over paragraph structures. Some teachers go crazy over paragraph structures. Whether you do PL, whether you do pretzel, whether you do Peter, the whole point of a paragraph structure is to make your life easy. Your paragraph structure must hit the mark scheme. Your paragraph structure must allow you to hit the top end. And then guys, pick whichever one you want. You decide which one is best for you. I use pretzel because it works the best for me. Is it the only way to get 8 out of 8? No, there's so many ways. And guys, remember, the exam boards are not marking pretzel or PL or Peter. They're marking your assessment objectives that we're going to cover in a few minutes. I say that because as you get closer and closer to the exams, your job is to understand the mark scheme, which I'm going to go over, and then you must decide which paragraph structure you think works the best. But don't have paragraph fights with schools and teachers. All right, guys, so 10 minutes. In those 10 minutes, you're aiming for 2 paragraphs. Now, we know that paper 1, guys, question number 2, we should know anyway, that it always looks at pretty much the second paragraph of the extract. And they give you the extract over here. But let's forget that extract for a second. Let's go straight to the question. The question says, how does the writer use language to do something? It's always the same question. How does the writer use language to talk about the weather? In this instance, is how does the writer use language to describe the hyena's appearance? Now, the exam boards tell you, they say to you that you can talk about words and phrases and you can talk about language devices for this question. Now, guys, when it comes to the 3rd bullet point, my advice to everyone is don't bother with it. Don't bother with it. Leave sentences if you need to use them for the structure question for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's always easier talking about sentence forms as a structural device. And number 2, there's so much we can say about language devices and words and phrases. We're only doing 2 paragraphs. There's so much we can say. We don't want to make life difficult in an exam. We want to make it easier. So I will leave that for later if you need it in paper 1, question 3. And for now, I would only focus on these 2. Now, guys, here's the question. What do they mean when they say language? What do they mean when they say words and phrases? What do they mean when they say language devices and so on? Guys, it's very clear here. When it comes to words and phrases, you are looking at literally four things. You are looking at verbs, you are looking at adverbs, you are looking at nouns, and you are looking at adjectives. Those are the four that you are looking at when it comes to words and phrases. A verb is an action, it is a doing word. So right now I am talking. Talking is a verb. An adverb describes the verb. So for example, I'm talking fast. Fast describes the verb. A noun is the name of something. iPad, pen, jumper, door. It's just the name. And an adjective describes that noun. It describes that thing. So for example, the iPad is black. Black is your adjective. These are your four over here. Then we have on this side, guys, on this side, we have to be able to talk about language devices. Language devices, you've got simile, you've got metaphor, you've got personification, you've got hyperbole. Guys, do make a note of these. I'm giving you the ones that are very common. Hyperbole, guys, you've got sibilance, you've got rule of three, and let's go for pathetic fallacy. Now, there's many language devices out there. Many language devices out there. However, guys, I see you guys as my students, and the last thing I want to do is waste your time. We don't need to know every language device that exists in the world. Look at my most popular videos. My most popular videos are my videos like top 50 language devices, top 25 language devices. It's not about how many language devices you know up here. It's about how many language devices can you practically use. My rule, guys, is very simple. Learn 8 to 10 language devices, know what they mean, know how to use them, know how to pick them, and that's enough. You don't need to know 20 language devices, 30 language devices, 50 language devices. It's not practical for an exam. You could literally walk into your GCSE exam knowing that and you're going to be fine. Because all we're doing is 2 paragraphs. Now, let me run through them very quickly. A simile, guys, is when you compare 2 nouns. It's when you compare 2 nouns using like or as. For example, this pen, my first noun, is like a wand, second noun. I've compared 2 nouns using like or as. Number 2, guys, a metaphor is when you compare 2 nouns without like or as. For example, this pen is a wand. There's no like, there's no as, but I'm comparing the pen to a wand. Number 3, guys, personification. Personification is when you give a non-human a human feature. For example, if I said this pen is sitting on my hand, that is personification. Number 4, guys, hyperbole. We all love this. Hyperbole is when you over exaggerate. Sir, I'm so angry, I'm gonna kill him. Sir, I'm so hungry, I'm gonna eat a horse. These are all hyperboles. It's when you over exaggerate. Number 5, guys, sibilance. I hate alliteration. I think it's one of the worst language devices because it very rarely has a good effect. Sibilance is way better. Sibilance is when words in a row begin with the S letter or the S sound. For example, the snake slithered through the sand. Number 6, guys, rule of 3. Why did I do 6 and 8? I can't count. Guys, number 6 is rule of 3. This is when you have 3 words or phrases in a row to describe one thing. So for example, in Macbeth, thunder, lightning and rain. If I said, guys, in this room, I've got a camera in front of me, I've got a door to my left, and I've got another door to my right. That's rule of 3, because I've given you 3 phrases to describe this room. Guys, number 7, pathetic fallacy. I love pathetic fallacy. Pathetic fallacy is when the writer uses the weather to reflect the mood. So if everyone's really scared, then there might be thunder outside. But if everyone's happy, then the sun could be shining. Guys, let's go for 8, 9, 10. Number 8, guys, number 8, let's please make a note of onomatopoeia. Guys, onomatopoeia is sounds, crash, bang, boom, creak. These are all examples of onomatopoeia. Number 9, let's go for symbolism. Guys, number 9, let's go for symbolism. Symbolism is when the writer uses objects or words to have a wider meaning. For example, when I see somebody wearing a face mask, for me, the face mask now is a symbol of COVID. That face mask, for me, it reminds me of COVID. When I see an M in the sky, I think of McDonald's. If somebody comes through that door with a shotgun, I'm gonna run or I'm gonna fight, because the shotgun symbolizes danger. These are all examples of symbolism. And guys, number 10, the last one, let's go for juxtaposition. Let's go for juxtaposition. Guys, juxtaposition is when things are not how they are supposed to be. It's when things are strange. The dictionary definition is when you have two contrasting ideas, but sometimes that can be difficult to understand. Practically, guys, juxtaposition is when things are not normal, it's when things are strange. For example, Macbeth kills the king. He was supposed to protect the king. Him killing the king juxtaposes everything he was supposed to do. Juliet, she was supposed to be an obedient daughter, serving her parents. But when she disobeys them, she juxtaposes the norms in that society. These are all examples of juxtaposition. If I start picking my bogies and eating them right now, that's juxtaposition, because that's just not what you do on camera and off camera. But guys, you get it. Juxtaposition is when things are not normal. So in our exam, we must, when it comes to language, we must talk about this and we must talk about this. Now guys, I have a question. Can you get 8 out of 8 by just talking about these? Can you get 8 out of 8 just by talking about verbs, adverbs, adjectives and nouns? Or do you have to talk about language devices? The answer is very clear. If you look at the exam board, if you look at AQA published a model answer. It got 7 out of 8. They published it, and this answer spoke about an adjective, it spoke about a simile, and it spoke about a verb, and they gave it 7 out of 8. So what does that mean for us? Can you get top bands by not talking about loads of language devices? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Why? Because this is where the mark scheme comes into play. Everything I say, you should only listen to it if I can back it up with the mark scheme. Otherwise, guys, I'm chatting poop. So here's my advice to you guys. Do you have to talk about language devices to get 8 out of 8? No, you don't. There are many model answers published by the exam board where kids rely more on this side than they do on this side, and they get 8 out of 8. There's even some answers that have been given 8 out of 8 and they just speak about verbs. However, what's my advice? My advice is mix it up with the two of them. Why? Because words are limited. When you're speaking about nouns or verbs or adjectives, you're speaking about singular words. Whereas when you're speaking about similes, metaphor, personification, you've got a couple of words to work with. There's more effect to be had. So I would do a bit of that and a bit of that. But the point to be understood is this. If you're in your exam and you cannot find any of these, it's not the end of the world. That's the take-home point. If you're in your exam in May and in June and you can't find similes, you can't find metaphors, you can't find personification, you can't find hyperbole, and the clock is ticking, it's cool. Go this way and just pick out these and you still have a chance of getting top band. Now guys, let's go over the mark scheme, because the mark scheme will dictate what exactly we have to do for this question. Now, very clearly guys, on the board, you can see the following. To get 8 out of 8, this question marks you on 3 things. 1, 2, 3. There's no secret here. So sometimes I get students saying to me, oh sir, my teacher told me this, my cat told me this, somebody on TikTok told me this. Guys, look, this is not my dad's mark scheme. This is their mark scheme. Very simple. You got to do 1, 2, 3. There's nothing extra. There's nothing extra to be added. 3 things is what we have to do. Number 1, guys, we must have textual detail. Textual detail, guys, all that means is in our answer, we must have quotes. Easy. Of course we need quotes. Second thing you must do, in your answer, you must have subject terminology. What does subject terminology mean, guys? Subject terminology is talking about techniques, because what are English specific words? However, furthermore, in addition, these are not English specific words. These are words you would use in any essay based subject. History, geography, you will always use these words. However, the techniques is what makes your words English specific. Similes, metaphors, verbs, adjectives. You're not using these words in maths or science or geography unless you want to fail in those subjects. The only subject where you're going to use the techniques is in English. So the exam board AQA is saying to you, you must have quotes and you must find techniques inside of your quotes. Easy. We all know that. We should all know by this point in year 11 that we're going to be marked on our quotes, we're going to be marked on our techniques. Done. Then we must be able to explain the effect. We must be able to explain the effect. Now, what are we explaining the effect of? Are we explaining the effect of the quote or the effect of the technique? The answer is in the mark scheme. We must explain the effect of the choice of language, meaning we must explain the effect of the technique. And that's it. You are only marked on these 3 things. Nothing else. You're marked upon your quote, you're marked upon your technique, you're marked upon your effect. However, does that mean all of you sitting at home are now going to get a grade 9? No, because the exam boards are intelligent. The exam boards understand that we have to put in mechanisms that separate the grade 1s and 2s, the grades 4s and 5s, and the grades 7, 8s and 9s. Just because you do these 3 things doesn't mean you're going to get a grade 9. What are they asking us to do? All of this must be done in a criteria. So they are saying that when you do your quote, when you do your technique, and when you do your effect, you must do it with detail. Now, what does detail basically mean, guys? To have detail, basically, you need to write a lot. You need to write a lot. You can't write 2 lines and say, sir, why am I failing? You need to write a decent amount. However, let me pull up a paper over here. Here's an answer that I'm marking right now for my year 11s. This kid over here, they've written what seems to be a lot. It seems to be a decent amount. However, is writing a lot enough? For all I know, they could be waffling this whole page. Writing a lot by itself isn't a sign of a grade 9. The exam boards, and I respect them for doing this because it's very important. The exam boards say you must write a lot, but it must also be perceptive. What does perceptive mean? Perceptive looks at the quality of what you're writing. Are you chatting poop for a whole page, or are you actually focusing on the question and explaining the effect? Are you being insightful? Are you being perceptive? Is it of a high quality? So the exam board is saying you must do 1, 2, 3, but it must be detailed and it must be of a high quality. Now I ask you a very common sense question. Which of the 3 bullet points of the mark scheme can you be detailed? Can you be detailed when you are doing your quote? No, it's impossible. Because when you're doing your quote, all you're doing is copying somebody else's work. You can't add to it. So no, it's impossible to be detailed when you're doing your quote. Is it possible to be detailed when you're doing your technique? No, because all you're saying is the writer has used a simile, the writer has used hyperbole, the writer has used an adjective, the writer has used a noun. You can't add anything else. So common sense should tell you that the most important part of the mark scheme is your effect. Because it's the effect, and the effect is the only part of the paragraph where you can be detailed and perceptive. So if you want to get 8 out of 8, if you want to separate yourself from everybody else, how do you do it? It's going to be done through your effect. Now, this brings me to, why do I use pretzel? Why don't I just use P like we did back in year 7? Guys, very simple. Very, very simple. If we go through the mark scheme, right, we can see very clearly that when it comes to quotes, our paragraph needs a reference. Guys, we know that when it comes to quotes, our paragraph will need a reference. And after the reference, our paragraph will need a technique. And after our technique, our paragraph will need an effect, because that's in the mark scheme. You must have a reference, you must have a technique, you must have an effect. Very simple, right? There's no secret there. Now, to get this mark over here, to get this mark, to ensure that my students are getting the mark for detail, I always ask them to zoom in to the quote. I always ask them to zoom in after they finished explaining the effect of the technique. So I tell all my students, guys, that when you pick a technique, pick a device. And when you zoom in to a word. What does that mean? When you pick a technique, pick it from this side. When you zoom in, pick it from this side. So you've got one quote. The first thing you do is you find a technique, and then you explain the effect. Then you zoom in. You go back to the quote and you zoom in. And what do you do when you zoom in? Naturally, you explain the effect. Now, the R, the T, the E, the Z, and the E, all those bullet points on the board, they tick off the mark scheme. How? The reference. Guys, the reference, as you can see, the reference is marking your quote. Your technique is marked over there. Then you do your effect, that marks you over there. Then you zoom in. When you zoom in, you go back to your quote, which marks you over there, and you pick another technique, which marks you over there. And then you explain the effect. So, the R, the T, the E, the Z, and the E, they make sure that you hit each bullet point of the mark scheme 2 times. We do 2 effects, we do 2 quotes, we do 2 techniques. And then, on either side, I do the point, and at the bottom, I do the link. Now, are you marked on your point? Based upon this mark scheme, are you marked upon your point? Nope. And are you marked upon your link? Nope. So why do we do it? Why do I bother putting a point and a link in my paragraph structure when it doesn't even get marks for it? Because looking at the mark scheme, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's what you're getting marks for. So why do I bother with the point and the link? Very simple. The point is there for you, and the point is there for the examiner to show them that you are answering the question. So this question says something about the hyena. In your point, in source A, the hyena is presented as ugly. That's it. That's enough. Don't add detail, nothing, because you're not getting marks for it. But the purpose of your point is to direct the examiner so they know exactly what to expect in the paragraph. Keep it short, keep it simple, 1 line and you're done. Then your job is, let's say you're telling me over here that the hyena is ugly. Your job then is, in this entire paragraph, you must prove to me how the hyena is ugly through your quotes and your techniques and so on. And then the link. What is the link? I call it the waffle check. That's all it is there for. If you get to the end of your paragraph and you can't link your point, you can't link your paragraph back to your point, for example, therefore, as you can see, the hyena is ugly. If you can't do that, then you've probably gone off task. Your link is there to make sure you've not gone off task. But guys, make no mistake. Make no mistake. If you're running out of time in an exam, cut out the link. It's not worth any marks. It's there just to make sure we're not going off task. But the priority of our paragraph, should be this part over here, because that is what addresses the mark scheme. If anyone tells you different, direct them to the mark scheme, because they are wasting your time. Now, this is why I do pretzel, because pretzel, especially the zooming in part, allows you to get that detail. Now, I'm not a hater of PL or Peter. You pick whatever one you want. But PL is a single analysis paragraph. Peter is a single analysis paragraph. How much can you say about one technique before you run out of things to say? Pretzel, I find, it allows students, because it has that zooming in element, it allows students to just dig in deeper without repeating themselves. And that is why I use pretzel. Now, here's the mark scheme. I've shown you guys why I do what I do. Let's go back on the board over here. So here's the question, guys. Here's the question. And remember, guys, I use P, R, T, E, Z, E, and L. My technique, I get it from there. And my zooming in, I get it from there. Now, let me plan one paragraph on the board just so you guys can see how I would do this. So the question says, how does the writer use language to describe the hyena's appearance, right? That's the question. Now, as it's very clear to you guys, I'm planning a pretzel paragraph. So let's have a look and see what I can find. The spots of this hyena look rather like the symptoms of a skin disease. Now, let's keep it simple, guys. What is going to be my point? My point is that the hyena is presented as being absolutely ugly. There's my point complete, and here is my reference. I've got my quote. Done. Now I must pick my technique. The technique, guys, that I'm going to use for the first part is a simile. I am going to use the simile that is in this quote. And when it comes to zooming in, let's look at the quote. That look rather like the symptoms of a skin disease. Which word in this quote emphasizes the ugliness of this hyena? I'm gonna use the word disease. But we never say the word. Because why? We need the marks for subject terminology. So I'm not gonna say the word disease. I'm gonna call it what it is. I'm gonna zoom in to the noun. Disease. And there is my zoom done. And I'm going to say for my link, therefore, as you can see, the hyena is presented as ugly. There is one paragraph planned. All I would do is I would do that twice. But do you see, guys? I've picked my point. I've picked my quote. I've picked my technique. I've picked my zooming in. Now, me personally, guys, I don't plan my effect. Because I tell students that, number one, it will take too long, because if we're in a realistic exam, we haven't got time for that. But number two, guys, the reason I don't plan my effect is because you should already know the effect of the technique you're picking whilst you're picking it. Now, there's my plan, there's my language, there's what I've picked, there's the mark scheme. Now let's go over a model answer. This answer was published by the exam boards. It was published by AQA. And the first things first, guys, look at the right hand side. This answer got 7 out of 8. So it was top band. And very clearly, guys, as you can see, it was marked for three things. It was marked for the effect, it was marked for the quote, it was marked for subject terminology. It was not marked for anything else. Three things: effect, quote, and subject terminology. And very clearly, guys, you can see when it comes to subject terminology that is picking out metaphors, similes, verbs, and adjectives. Now, I won't read the whole answer, guys. Let's just look at it for a second. As you can see, in each paragraph, they've got two quotes. In the first one, there's the quote, then they zoomed in to the quote. In the second one, there's the quote, then they zoomed in to the quote. That's the quotes, guys. Exactly what I just said. By the way, guys, this is June 2024. This is last year's paper. So it's the most recent one to use. So, two quotes, two zooming ins. Look at what they picked. Technique, word or a phrase. Technique, word or a phrase. Nothing crazy. They picked a simile and a verb, a metaphor and an adjective. Very simple, very straightforward devices that you're taught in year 7. However, what did they gain the marks in? The examiner didn't give them 7 out of 8 because of what they picked. They gave them 7 out of 8 because of the color that you can see standing out the most. It's the purple. It's the effect. And that's it, guys. You can read this in your own time. It's behind me. Take a screenshot. Do what you got to do. But this should reinforce, guys, this should reinforce all of this. All of this. Now, your schools, your teachers have access to this. This is published by exam boards. So, guys, let's go over this whole thing one more time. Paper 1, question number 2 is 8 marks, 10 minutes. 2 pretzel paragraphs is what you're aiming for. The mark scheme for this question looks at 3 things. It looks at your quotes, it looks at your technique, it looks at your effect. After looking at the mark scheme, I decided that the best paragraph structure to use is pretzel, because pretzel ticks off each element of the mark scheme 2 times. When it comes to your technique, pick out a language device, and when it comes to your zooming in, zoom into a word or a phrase. Here's an example of a paragraph plan that you might do in your exam. Now, how do we know this works? Number 1, we know it ticks off the mark scheme, and number 2, if we look at June 2024, which is last year's paper, the exam board published a top band response, 7 out of 8, which literally uses pretzel. It's literally pretzel that they've used. So guys, my advice to you guys is this. Now you know what to do and you've seen why we do it like that. My advice would be pull up a past paper, education.co.uk, and you click on the past paper tab, and then you scroll down and you click on English language, and then you click on paper 1. Here you'll find all the past papers. Here guys, you'll find all the past papers. Here's the question papers, here's the inserts. Pick one. So for example, you might pick June 2023. Scroll down and go for it. Try to answer that question based upon what we've just covered. In a later video, guys, I will go over how you write a pretzel paragraph. That wasn't for this video. Or how you write the effect. I will cover all of that. But this video is just making you understand what exactly paper 1 question 2 looks at. And to be honest with you guys, if you want a model response, there's one there for you that you can base your writing upon. And as you can see guys, they've not written a lot. It's not as though they've written 10,000 pages. They've written a good amount, hitting the mark scheme, and they do it beautifully. Alright guys, it's been Mr. Everything English. I think I'll do question 3 next. As always, it's been Mr. Everything English. Peace.